Chapter 1. Wandering Far and Unfettered. Part 1. The fish named Kun and the bird named Peng. There is a fish in the northern oblivion named Kun, and this Kun is quite huge, spanning who knows how many thousands of miles. He transforms into a bird named Peng, and this Peng has quite a back on him, stretching who knows how many thousands of miles. When he rouses himself and soars into the air, his wings are like clouds draped across the heavens. The ocean starts to churn, and this bird begins his journey toward the southern oblivion. This southern oblivion is also known as the Pool of Heaven. The Equalizing Joke Book, a record of many wonders, reports when Peng journeys to the southern oblivion, the waters ripple for 3,000 miles. Spiraling aloft with the whirling winds, he ascends 90,000 miles into the sky, availing himself of the gusting breath of the mid-year to make his departure. It's a galloping heat haze. It's a swirl of dust. It's some living creature blown about on the breath of the air. And the blue on blue of the sky, is that the sky's true color? Or is it just the vast distance going on and on without end? When Peng looks down, he too sees only this and nothing more. Now, if the water is not piled up thickly enough, it has no power to support a large vessel. Overturn a cupful of water in a hole in the road, and you can float a mustard seed in it like a boat. But if you put the cup itself in there, it will just get stuck. The water is too shallow for so large a vessel. And if the wind is not piled up thickly enough, it has no power to support Peng's enormous wings. That is why he needs to put 90,000 miles of air beneath him. Only then, bearing the blue of the heaven on his back and unobstructed on all sides, can he ride the wind and make his way south. And see this! The cicada and the fledging dove laugh at him, saying,
"We scurry up into the air, leaping from elm to the sandalwood tree, and when we don't quite make it, we just plummet to the ground. What's all this about ascending 90,000 miles and heading south?"
You see, if you're only making an outing to the nearby woods, you can bring along your 3 meals for the day and return with your belly still full. If you're traveling 100 miles, you'll need to husk grain for the journey the night before. And if you're traveling 1,000 miles, you'll need to save up provisions for 3 months before you go. What do these two little insects know? A small consciousness cannot keep up with a vast consciousness. Short duration cannot keep up with long duration. How do we know? The morning mushrooms know nothing of the noontide. The winter cicada knows nothing of the spring and autumn. This is what is meant by short duration. In southern Chu, there is a tree called Mingling, for which 500 years are as a single spring, and another 500 years are as a single autumn. In ancient times, there was even one massive tree whose spring and autumn were each 8,000 years long. And yet nowadays, Peng Zhu alone has a special reputation for longevity, and everyone tries to match him. Pathetic, isn't it? Is this not exactly what Teng's question to Ji amounted to? Hear this. It will sound familiar. In the barren Northland, there's a dark ocean called the Pool of Heaven. There's a fish there several thousand miles across with a length that is yet unknown, named Kun. There's a bird there named Peng with a back like Mount Tai and wings like clouds draped across the heavens. In a spiraling ascent that twists like a ram's horn, he climbs 90,000 miles, breaking through the clouds and bearing the blue of the sky on his back, and then heads south, finally arriving at the southern oblivion. And yet again, a smaller creature, the scold quail, laughs at him, saying, "Where does he think he's going? I leap into the air with all my might, but before I get farther than a few yards, I drop to the ground. My twittering and fluttering between the bushes and branches is the utmost form of flying. So, where does he think he's going?" Such is the difference between the large and the small. Likewise, he whose understanding is sufficient to fill some one post, or whose deeds meet the needs of some one village, or whose personal virtues please some one ruler, or who is able to prove himself in a single country, sees himself in just the same way. Even someone like Zhuangzi would burst out laughing at such a man. If the whole world happened to praise Zhuangzi, he would not be goaded onward. If the whole world condemned him, he would not be deterred. He simply made a sharp and fixed division between the inner and the outer, and clearly discerned where true honor and disgrace reside. He did not involve himself in anxious calculations in the dealings with the world. Nevertheless, there was still a sense in which he was not really firmly planted. Now, Li Zi got around by charioting upon the wind itself and was so good at it that he could go on like that in his cool and breezy way for 15 days at a time before heading back. He was someone who didn't get caught up in anxious calculations about bringing the blessings of good fortune upon himself. Nevertheless, although this allowed him to avoid the exertions of walking, there was still something he needed to depend on. But suppose you were to chariot upon what is true, both to heaven and to earth, riding atop the back and forth of the 6 atmospheric breaths, so that your wandering could nowhere be brought to a halt. You would then be depending on what? Thus I say, the utmost person has no definite identity. The spirit-like person has no particular merit. The sage has no name.